Hello, guys, and thank you for joining. Today we have an amazing guest, which is Eric. He is a collector of many different things, whether it be art, tickets, games, sports cards. He kind of covers every single avenue that you could imagine. And I followed him for a while. He definitely played a massive role in my ticket collecting journey with some of his comments. So, Eric, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Eric Naierman. I'm originally from Staten Island, New York. I'm professionally a dentist, married with five little kids, and I started collecting in around 2015 just as a fun hobby to kind of reawaken what I did as a kid as a baseball card collector. And since then, it's really morphed into a very interesting journey of as you said, many different things, including tickets and video games and Bob Ross paintings, and it's just a work in progress, but I'm enjoying every minute of it.
Absolutely. So, within specifically tickets, when did you really first learn about tickets as collectibles?
It was probably, I would have to say, early 2020. I think my first
Mhm.
ticket that I bought was actually a LeBron James NBA debut ticket in April 2020, I think. And when the market was kind of picking up for his rookie cards, I said to myself, how cool would it be if to capture that rookie card esque collectible and merge it with memorabilia? I thought tickets really were able to merge that for me in my mind. So I bought one on eBay and kind of started from there.
Absolutely, and we'll touch on that NBA debut in a minute. But yeah, I think kind of having the sports card and then the ticket next to it together is a really nice partnership. And I think, as you know, sports cards do kind of naturally lead into tickets as well. So hopefully, as the market develops, an avenue that people kind of venture into.
Yeah, I believe so.
Exactly. So on that topic of the NBA debut, we have a lot of EU listeners here, so everyone's really within Europe. Of course, a few American listeners as well. But as EU collectors, we mainly collect the professional debuts, so the first time they play a professional event. So whether it's football or tennis or anything like that, it's the first professional event. With you guys in America, you have friendly debuts, you have pro debuts that were friendlies, you have NBA debuts, etc., etc. Do you want to kind of expand on that and make us more aware of those sort of topics?
So I mean, it's kind of simple. We have a preseason and then a regular season.
Hmm.
So the preseason, for some reason, they don't call it preseason debut; they call it the pro debut, which is literally their first time coming out onto I guess you could say, an NBA or NHL or MLB sanctioned field, but it's not
Hmm.
an official regulation game because the season hasn't started yet.
Okay.
So that's what they call the pro debut, which is literally the first time on the turf or the field or the court.
And
Um,
sorry, just to interrupt really quickly, does that impact their record? So when you look at their professional record, does that game kind of have a mark on that record or not? Or are you
I
not
don't
sure?
believe so. I don't believe
Okay.
so.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's the reason why most serious debut collectors kind of value the NBA or NHL or how they call it, where it's the first seasonal game, where their records really start, and we start really tracking them professionally at that point. That's why they hold higher value in most collectors' minds.
Absolutely. And to what extent are they more valuable? Is it a 2x multiplier or can it be more?
It's I don't have an exact multiplier, but
Yeah.
it's heavily more valuable. I would the LeBron James, for example, I think a debut ticket now goes for around 2 to 3 thousand, where a pro debut is more like 900 to 1,000. So at least a 2-3x multiple in most cases. Yeah.
Very interesting. You mentioned that your first ticket then was the LeBron debut. What is your favorite ticket in your collection at the moment? Do you want to make everyone aware of some of your top tickets?
Sure. Yeah, I have a few here that I brought. My top one just has to be just because of how much respect he gets and how much part of a culture he is of our culture is Michael Jordan's debut.
Yeah.
Um, that's just my favorite, and it's one of the first ones that I really spent major money on right before the pandemic. So this one's really special to me. Um, yeah, that's what we'll discuss too. Debuts aren't specifically about heartstrings or feeling special about a moment. That's what I like about debuts. They're not connected to moments really that you remember.
Yeah.
It's more of a rarity factor and a connection to the rookie card idea that I'm used to.
Hmm.
So I would have to say, just like in my collection, some of my higher end Michael Jordan cards are going to be my most precious and most valuable cards because of how much effect and influence Jordan has had on American society and my culture. This is really, really one of the number ones for me.
Very interesting. You mentioned moments versus debuts there. It's quite an interesting and highly debated topic. I mean, a lot of the true OG collectors seem to be very memorable focused.
Yeah.
Those that were kind of in it before 2020. What are your thoughts on that?
So I totally get it. First of all, it totally makes more sense. I'll say it that way. It makes more sense
Yeah.
as a collector than the way I do it, or the way, let's say, a debut collector would. But you could see across everything that I collect, more than just the item excites me. It's more of the novelty that it exists that excites me more than the item itself.
Hmm.
Even with video games, like I didn't necessarily go for specifically Super Mario or Zelda, which may have had the most influence or nostalgia to me or myself. I do have some of those, but I was attracted very early on to a first print Ice Climber or a first print balloon fight, which I never played. Most people
Yeah.
never played. Was not a popular game in culture, but the idea of when I started figuring out that a first print that didn't make sense not to open during the launch time of Nintendo in 1985, and only one or two or tops five stayed closed, that's what really got me excited. So you find that a lot with the collectibles. It's less about the piece itself than it is about the fact that, wow, I can't believe I own one of these copies to, for some magical reason, to exist today. So Michael
Yeah.
Jordan debut is that same idea for me, where maybe nobody was watching that game or nobody remembers that game or it wasn't part of his highlight reel. But the fact that someone went to that game and didn't see really anything astounding happen and somehow saved the ticket is the most mind blowing thing for me to own personally.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And debuts, unless I mean now it's a different story because people are aware of the financial value and the status that it holds. But anything really pre 2020 as a debut is, if nothing happened, a very difficult find.
Well, I wouldn't say 2020. I would say really LeBron James' era really changed it because if I actually have his pro debut here, and if you
Yeah.
see, it says on the ticket LeBron James' professional debut. So this was a
Wow.
highly anticipated game that you kind of knew to maybe say go to and save the ticket. It literally says it on the ticket. Now,
Yeah.
people
Okay.
may not have known to collect it, save it, and grade it, but but people knew that it was a very special moment in sports history, possibly.
Okay.
So let's just say I get less excited about owning that than I do, let's say, uh, Wayne Gretzky or Mickey Mantle debut, where
Yeah.
literally no one at that game knew what they were witnessing, especially Mickey Mantle from 1951, April 1951. Um, it's astounding that these exist to me, and to own a copy is so much more exciting than it is something that someone maybe would have thought to save.
Absolutely. In our culture, we have like, and I'm sure the same for America. But when new stadiums open, it's a big thing, and especially in some of the friendly debuts, so non-professional debuts for the likes of Messi and other players, people tend to keep the tickets because it was the inauguration of the stadium. But in fact, it was a friendly debut. So the supply of the Messi Porto game, which I don't know if you're aware of.
I'm visually aware of the Messi tickets. One is like
Yeah.
blue and white.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's his
Okay.
friendly debut. Again, not the a professional game, not one that impacted his record. The population of that is like 300 compared to his professional one, which is around four. And again, the
Mhm.
nuance of it being a inauguration of the stadium. So yeah, as you
Right.
mentioned, if nothing happened, the supply is obviously much lower.
Right. Yeah. So that's why anything post year 2003, basically in tickets, I found that they're a little more populous than the vintage, and I really try to concentrate on that higher grade. Here's an example of that where this is a 2004. Um, it's an Eli Manning who was very important to my life because I was a Giants fan growing up from New York.
Yeah.
And he won two Super Bowls, that magical essentially wins against the Patriots. So he was a big part of my life, and this is the only PSA 10. So that's
Okay.
why to own a copy of this is cool for sure. There's not a ton. There's probably like maybe 30 to 40 at most. But to own number one PSA 10, that then became grade becomes much more important to me.
Absolutely. And a lot of your collection seems to be graded. Do you buy many raw tickets or do you tend to take the safer option?
Um, I almost always buy graded collectibles in general,
Hmm.
um, both because I'm not so good at at seeing a picture and knowing what grade it's going to be. I'm terrible at it,
Yeah.
so I'd rather know and then know what I'm buying rather than guess.
Yeah.
And also it depends when I was buying. Like during the pandemic, you were buying a lot more raw stuff because that's just what was popping up because the grading companies were closed. So I would say most of the raw stuff I bought was during the pandemic that I'm getting around to grading now.
Hmm.
But I like to go graded because I like to know exactly what I'm buying. Is it a 9? Is it a 10? I don't want to have to guess, you know?
Absolutely. And kind of the excitement with tickets is, I mean, as you say, pre 2003 or pre recently, the grade didn't really matter. Just owning it and understanding that this thing actually exists, like you say, is ultimately the most important thing. And I know for the UK, a lot of us had tickets growing up. Sorry, a lot of us had stickers, sports stickers growing up. Now, these are very difficult to grade. They might peel, fold, bend, whatever it may be. So we have a lot of frustration over here not having sports cards and having to grade them. So
Right.
this is a frustration, and this is what brought a lot of people into tickets because
Right.
the grade not ultimately isn't the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, yeah, it's really just amazing to have some of these at all.
Hmm. Absolutely. Now I've got a list of questions which I noted down before, which I wanted to ask.
Hmm.
Now, what do you think the population of some of these tickets will be in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think most of them have come out the woodworks now, or do you think more are yet to be discovered? So yeah, what's your prediction over the next 5 to 10 years?
It definitely I think most has come out of the woodwork already. I mean, if you needed anything more than the pandemic and what we've experienced with pricing and everything to get these things out of your closet, then it probably would have happened at this point. Now there's never an end to anything coming out of the woodwork. You know, you see this with vintage cars. There are cards from 1900 still coming out of the woodwork. You know, people are finding. So there's never an end to it, but I really don't think we're going to see a big bulk of inventory at any point that we haven't seen already. Now, and I find that when that slows down, and sometimes when you do get a big bulk of inventory, it's usually like a surprise find, which
Yeah,
actually adds value a lot rather than the opposite.
yeah, very, very true.
Yeah.
A lot of your tickets seem to be pretty high end, pretty expensive. So what I know that means sometimes there's some financial pressure to sell. What are three tickets you would never sell or never consider selling?
I don't think there's any collectible that I have that I would never sell, honestly.
Every guest
It's
so
not
far
like
has said the same
it's not a
thing.
greed thing, but there's always more. There's always life challenges that you might need the money. I'm not a big believer in that. Maybe later in life, as I become, as I said, I'm not so connected to each collectible as some people are. It's not a heartstring thing for me. I'm not so emotionally attached to anything. So
Yeah,
I just love the general idea of just being a collector and just finding new cool things that make me excited.
yeah.
So I don't think there's anything that I have that I wouldn't sell at any price.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
Surely the Michael Jordan debut has to be up there though.
It's up there,
One of the
but
last to let
honestly,
go.
if somebody offered me, probably like 200K for that now, I'd sell it. I mean,
Yeah.
no one would because it's you could get it for less, and that's fine. So I'm happy to hold it. But something like that, with all my collectibles, and this happened a lot during the pandemic because there was such craziness that was going on. I always say I'm ready to sell when somebody offers me something that just a number that blows my mind that I never thought it could get to, or at least in this time frame. So, I sold a few tickets during the pandemic where they were just so absurdly overpriced for what I thought they were even worth that I'll take it and move on and buy other things. You know.
Absolutely. And I think I truly believe this. I think where people are more connected with tickets and sports cards because of the memories and moments it attaches, people have that perspective where they're only really willing to accept a price which is like out of this world. So it
Yeah.
means like finding a bargain or a good price or even a fair price is pretty difficult within the ticket industry. And that's
Right. I think
obviously
that's
coupled with low supply as well.
yeah, I think that's a good way to operate, and it's worked for me. It's like, it's just you end up keeping things for a very long time because most people aren't willing to buy things for more than they're worth, which is good for people who want to be long term in this, like myself. So I end up keeping things for 5, 10, 15 years, which is great. But I'm never so attached to it where it's just like, I'm not going to move on, take the money, and use it for my family or use it for something else I want to buy.
Yeah, and I do agree. I just think for new collectors coming in, it can be difficult to kind of dig deep into the hobby when it's so hard to even obtain some of this stuff.
Yeah, it is. But you know what? There's always new evolving niches, and there's always also waves of pricing. I mean, I know things are still expensive, but now is a good time to buy a lot of stuff that you couldn't get in 2021. So, it doesn't have to be the PSA 10 copy of everything. I always say you could, if you look at Michael Jordan inserts, for example, which are very popular among collectors, the PSA 10s are absurdly expensive and continue to go up. But so do the PSA 8s and the PSA 9s, just at their level. You don't see in general only PSA 10 Michael Jordan inserts go up, or even with vintage cards. You could get a Mickey Mantle rookie. I just got one, a 1951 Bowman, a PSA 2. It's not
Yeah,
impressive. It's 15 grand. You could get a PSA authentic for less. I mean, it's definitely a barrier to entry, but you could always pick your spot, and it could be affordable in some area to get involved, even in the high end, but at the lower spectrum of the high end.
got you. You mentioned new niches then as an opportunity for new collectors. Beyond debuts, is there anything else that you've kind of been inspired or excited by?
In the ticket market.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
very much so. I posted about this. I'm starting to collect a little bit, just very, very iconic pictures that were taken at certain games.
yeah.
This is an example of this. This is opening night of the 1996-1997 Bulls season. You can see
Hmm.
it says the ring ceremony. That's the only thing that was significant to write on the ticket that happened, because they had won the finals the year before, so they got their rings from their championship. But through some research, I realized that the iconic picture of Michael Jordan that's on his 1997 Metal Universe um, card, which everyone
Yeah.
loves, the PMG green, the PMG red. I collect the set that was taken at this game. So somebody discovered that, and I was like, "Oh, that's a cool ticket to have." Something that again no one would have known to save this ticket specifically for that reason.
Hmm.
So this is something cool that I started getting into as well. Iconic tickets
Yeah.
of iconic photos that were taken at certain games.
Yeah, I love them as well. And it kind of comes along with that extra research and hunting and kind of spending hours online reading news articles and trying to cross compare photos and backgrounds and things like that. But I think when you kind of hit the nail on the head and that research all adds up,
Yeah.
it's definitely worth it because you're able to get something at a good price.
And it's actually funny because people suspect me of these things at this point, because when I put together the date that picture was taken and realized I want that ticket, I started going over to Michael Jordan collectors. I mean, sorry, Bulls ticket collectors, and being like,
Yeah.
Do you have any tickets from November 2nd, 1996?" And they're all like, Why are you asking?" I'm like, "Oh, no reason." So like they kind of suspect I'm onto something, but I was able to get like four or five good copies. And again, it hasn't went up in price that much, and it's just something that I enjoy. But you never know. You never know what will take off.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, and one I haven't looked into too much, but definitely something pretty cool. And I think the
Yeah.
reason I haven't is probably because of that research. Sometimes it's not always there.
So yeah, this actually.
You're back.
Yeah, okay. I've spoken about this before. The LeBron James pro debut happens to also be the picture from the picture was taken for his Topps Chrome iconic rookie card as well. So I specifically love this one because this is like a double banger for me. It's his first time on an NBA court, and it's also the picture was taken where he's taking a shot over Ben Wallace at the end of the third quarter. That became his Topps Chrome picture, which he missed
Yeah.
the shot by a mile, which is funny. But yeah, this one happens to be both. It's a debut and an iconic photo, so I like that
Have
also.
PSA acknowledged that yet? Do they do anything significant on the label or on the flip to kind of
I think
acknowledge the airlines?
I think so. So I just sent in yesterday the ticket where I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. There's a famous alley oop photo of LeBron James and Dwayne Wade when he was on the Heat, where Dwayne Wade is kind of like off to the side and puts up the ball, and then LeBron James is coming emphatically for the jam. It became a very iconic photo, and that I found the ticket for, and I sent in. I believe that they're gonna mark like LeBron James Wade alley oop. Um, I think, and that would be cool if they
Yeah,
recognize that.
that'd be very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Let me go through some of the other questions that I've got for you. This is one from an investment perspective, and I think it's actually a very interesting question. You've obviously seen the rise in sports cards as collectibles. what are like three things that you think the ticket collecting hobby needs to kind of grow over the next 5 years?
Um, it's hard to say specifically, but what I found that really motivates collectors, because we had a few phases recently, right? Since I we had the collecting phase where it was just collectors, just kind of nerdiness in the early 2000s to do any of this stuff. And then it started heating up to an investment perspective, and then the speculators came in just to make money. So that was not healthy, but that's what happened. And now I see, now that the price have dropped, it's back to the collector type S cards are coming back, and the investor type cards are not. So what I would say is, it's very important to capture the collector's long term intention over the speculators. So, for example, with cards, a lot of a factor that really affects that is, let's say, set collecting. Okay, where there are a lot of high end Michael Jordan collectors, for example, who set out to have all his notable inserts of the 90s. And because there
Hmm.
are so many people trying to complete that kind of set, that's really driving up the prices again and keeping it as a good investment. So I find that set collecting is very important. So I think that that's what video games needs. It's in a way what tickets needs, where we make like formal sets, like all the debuts of NFL Hall of Famers. I don't know, something like
Hmm.
that. Just some type of kind of goal that collectors need to set up for themselves. That want something you have as part of that goal. Because I find
Hmm.
that when people get to the end of their sets, they end up paying a lot more money because, hey, this might be
I
Chauncey
need this.
Billups, a debut, and it means nothing, but I need this for my set. I find that
Uh-huh.
with my '97 medal collecting set, I'm paying almost $1,000 now a card for people who are unimportant basketball players because they're very rare in PSA 10 and I need them for my set.
Yeah,
So again, I don't know if there's a way to do that in video games that well or tickets, but I find that that's really important to get the attention of collectors, and a lot
yeah.
of times it has to do with meeting their goals as collectors.
I do think ticket collecting has that. I'm not sure about in the American culture, but we have obviously the World Cup as football things. They happen every 4 years, so people tend to collect the final ticket from every year. So that's a set that will just continually grow. And
Yeah,
FIFA continuously printing tickets for the finals, which is great because it keeps the hobby alive for that. But
yeah,
then on top of that, like people collect players, so you want the debut, you want the first goal. Some people want the first Champions League game, first World Cup game. So
yeah.
there are sets within that for specific athletes as well, which people collect. And I think they go so nicely together when you kind of bring a collection like that together.
Yeah, I think in tickets, for example, like I've been collecting also a lot of debuts and then final games. So,
Yeah,
a final game might be underpriced now for someone who eventually wants to sell it to someone who has the debut and wants the final game. So that's also, an interesting little niche. But I think it has a lot has to do with people only overpay when they need it and they can't get it anywhere else type of thing. So you
yeah.
want to set yourself up to have, I think, collectibles that represent that.
Yeah. On the note of last games, I think for music, like last performance is a really cool thing because
Yeah,
they often let their heart out and it's a moment that everyone really feels. In
yeah,
sports, especially football, I'm not sure about basketball, but these games are like pre-anticipated. Everyone knows it's the last game. So often, firstly, the supply is a lot higher, but secondly, it's not. It's a testimonial. It's not often a competitive game. It's kind of like kind of clap goodbye sort of thing. So nothing really
yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, it also depends on how that last game transpired. Again, if the person passed away in a car accident the next day, so nobody knew to save those tickets. So those might be rarer and more sought after than, as you said, someone who's expected to retire and everyone knows it's their last game. So that's an interesting point as well.
Definitely, definitely. Let me get my long list of questions up for you because I don't want to miss anything. What are your thoughts on autographs? I've seen you kind of ranting on your stories on that a few times,
Yeah.
mentioning a few different things. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so autographs also go back to rarity for me. How rare and wild is it for this ticket to be autographed? If it's a matter of just cracking it out of the sleeve, sending it in for $300 to the player who's signs all the time and getting it
Yeah,
autographed, that's not such a novelty for me. But for example, a friend of mine has a signed Kobe debut, and we know Kobe passed away before the pandemic, before all this craziness happened where everything needed to be signed and collected and everything. So that has a lot more value to me because A, you cannot get it anymore. Whatever supply we have is definite, and also it was pre the notion of, oh, we need to get Kobe to sign this,
Yeah.
So again, for me, autographs, and then there's that fact of how much value does it add, and there's also the fact that a lot of my collectibles I prefer to not be tampered with, even with the player itself. Like I see
Hmm.
people getting, for example, their Mike Tyson Punch Out game signed by Mike Tyson. So I have no problem with that on a cartridge. That's very common. But if I had a first print, you know, Punch Out, which I don't even think there's one, there's maybe one that's sealed, and I had it, I don't want Mike Tyson drawing on that thing.
Yeah.
So there's that factor too. Is like if something's so special, like maybe you don't want anyone writing on it, even if it's the person who's most special to write on it. So I like the things in their original condition. So most of the time, I don't even want the players scribbling on it. And but if it's the only way I can get it, and it looks good, and it's not that much more money, and it's worth it to me, then I'll buy it.
Yeah. Inscriptions are an interesting thing. I'm not too sure, and I haven't even made my mind up. But when they write my first game or my first goal or my debut, what are your thoughts on that as well? Because it
So
tends to take the
again,
eye appeal away.
it's very it's for me. It's I don't know. It's kind of like I don't like when things are played out the way they're supposed to be. I like when
Yeah.
it's like not supposed to be that way. So yeah, I mean, like when I was looking for a Brady debut, I have one with an inscription that says NFL debut, but I
Hmm.
didn't send this in. This is how the owner decided to do it, and I wanted one, and I figured that their price that I paid for it added the right amount of value to have it. But it is what it is. You kind of have to look at the collectible as a whole, and figure out what it's worth in your mind. Most of the time, as I said, I'd rather they didn't sign it. But if that's how it came and it looks good, I'm fine with it.
Very interesting. What other things you collect then? You mentioned at the beginning that you're into art, video games. There's also the $1 million+ uh, collection that you were involved in buying. Explain to us that story and then some other collectibles that you buy.
So that's a long story. I'll try to keep it short. But basically, when I got in back into the hobby in 2015, and when I say hobby, I mean the sports card hobby. I have to admit I had like this insecurity of like I missed the boat a little bit. I'm definitely early, I guess, from people who got in recently. But at
Yeah.
that point in 2015, I was meeting people with these massive collections that they were procuring since the 90s or early 2000s, and I was like, I'll never get there. I wasn't a wealthy guy. I had a family to support, so I felt very insecure about the fact that yeah, I'm going to buy some cool cards, but I'll never have like a world class collection at this point because I'm too late or not wealthy enough or whatever it is. So basically, in 2018, I decided to take my first big leap into the higher end of sports cards. I bought like a $75,000 Mike Trout card. It was exciting, but again, I had this insecurity of like I'm still not going to have a world class collection. I'm just going to be like at the feet of the people who have the real world class collections. So around that time when I realized that video games were a thing, I realized, oh, how cool would it be if this is like really the beginning of something that in 20, 30 years will be like the sports card market. That right now I could buy video games like I would have bought sports cards 20, 30 years ago in a way that I will have a world class collection, in 20, 30 years. And that was the idea, that was the premise. But the problem is also when I looked into it, it still took a serious amount of money to do that in 2019 that I didn't have. I didn't have. I really realized it would take about $1 million, and I didn't have that to spend. So my idea was this was actually my brother-in-law's idea at the time. Why don't you syndicate it? Why don't you bring in people who want to make some passive income and see your passion about what you want to do here and believe in your vision, and it'll be like a mutually agreeable situation where if I'm right and I do end up with a world-class collection worth millions in the future, so first of all I'll have the time of my life procuring that and being part ownership of that, and they might make some money at the end, helping me do that. Where if we sell it later for a lot more, they'll get a cut of that. So that was the idea, to make it a business slash um, accelerated way to get a world class collection in an up and coming niche market.
Are you the lucky one that gets to hold them, or how did that work?
Yeah, so that's the deal. I might make no money out of this. Honestly, I might have done 5 to 10 years of work procuring these games, and we might sell it for a loss, or we might sell it for basically what we paid for it. But guess what? I personally end up um, maybe not dollar wise getting any money because I wouldn't, but I'm enjoying every moment of it. So that's something that they don't realize that I'm not about all the dollars for this. So if I actually make no money at the end of this, I actually would have enjoyed the
You're
process, and
still
I
up.
would do it again and again and again because there's equity to me in the process, and they don't realize that. Would I like to make money too for my time and effort and my research? Sure. But if I make no money out of this, I'm gonna have enjoyed every moment. I would have done it 10 times over.
That's an interesting thing about bulk buy. I assume that was from a shop, a shut down shop, or is it something along those story on that line?
Which one?
Was the purchase of those goods from like a shop that had shut down, or was it from another
No, it
collector?
wasn't a shop. It was a very interesting story. Basically, I didn't know when I started this fund about this find in video games, but apparently there was I don't know if you're familiar with the Mile High find in comics.
No, I'm not.
Basically, it's a once in a lifetime find where this artist. I think his name was Church. Last name was Church. He was an artist, and when in the 1930s, when the golden age comic books were coming out, he would every single day go to the newsstand, buy the comics as they come out, and just put them in storage in his basement in Colorado, I think. And it turned out that years later, that these comic books ended up being, the Grail of Grails, and the climate that he kept it in Colorado was just perfect. That it kept it in mint condition, and this
Yeah,
became the Mile High Collection, which some realtor discovered when he died and he was selling his house, and the children wanted to get rid of all these loads of trash that were in his basement, and it turned out to be one of the greatest finds in the history of comic books. And what was funny to me about that was that the greatest comic is the Action One comic, which was the first appearance of Superman, right? And there
hmm
was a pristine copy of Action One in the Mile High find, and it was bought by a retired dentist named Anderson, Dr. Anderson. And his son went on after that to become a big comic collector. So that really kind of cemented in my mind when this was going on with the video games. The
yeah,
Mile High find, finding the best copies of the earliest prints, and a dentist swooping in buying the best copy of all those. So that stuck in my mind. So then when I heard about the Wisconsin sticker seal find, which is not an official name, I named it that.
yeah.
It's very not known, and it's just the people who found it told me about it, and I think it's one of the best video game finds of all time. And I think in 20, 30 years it will have a name and recognition. But when I found out about that, and I recognized that that's a very similar scenario of an old Atari game collector who would buy every game and open it and play it. And then when Nintendo came out in 1985, he was too old to play games, but he was already in this mode of just buying every game as it came out. So he started buying all the first print Nintendo games and sticking them in his closet, never playing them. He passed away 2012. His heirs wanted to clean out this closet of junk. They put a sticker sealed Mario Brothers on eBay, and a savvy collector saw it, blew his mind. Where could this possibly have come from? Ended up discovering this in Wisconsin in a closet. They flew out there. They bought the whole find. So most of my games are from those two collectors who flew out there and bought from this sticker seal find. So in my mind, that was like an explosion in my mind. It's like, oh my god, this is the mile high find of video games. It's probably only happened once and will only happen once. And I'm gonna be that dentist who swoops in and buys everything from that find, and who knows what's going to happen after that. But this was my moment to do what I needed to do in collecting, and that's the story behind the games that I have.
That's a very interesting story, and I think kind of bringing that back to tickets, there is never, but most people haven't collected tickets at bulk or even own them at bulk. So the likelihood of a big collection is very unlikely. I
Yeah,
think very unlikely of this mile high ticket collection ever kind of surfacing. Yes, people have got a few here and there from games, but nothing of like significant value or history. So it is
right.
very interesting to see if that kind of comes to surface for tickets or whether it's specific to different hobbies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. But yeah, on the topic of games, shops bought loads of stock, shut down, and might have kept their stuff in storage. So there's some probability that that hunt is still alive for more stuff.
Yeah, but the thing that I find so interesting about like sticker sealed and first print games is that they actually weren't buying those games in bulk. And there weren't video game stores at that point. We're talking about when Nintendo was just trying to become a thing in North America. So there weren't video game stores yet. Atari had just crashed, so people were actually disillusioned by video games at the time. So it was the perfect moment, I think, to make sealed games just impossible to find and impossible to be around. And those are the games that I really zone in on.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Let's keep it to one more question then before we head off. Have you ventured into any other avenues beyond kind of basketball and baseball? Have you looked into soccer, F1, music, or anything like that?
In tickets, not really. No, I'm really sports centric when it comes to those type of things. So no, I mean, and soccer and all this stuff, it really just confuses me. With I just don't understand it. So no, not really.
Yeah.
I will say this. Yes, I do have, for example, like Dale Earnhardt's last ride, because he was a racing legend that passed away in a crash. So things like that sometimes do appeal to me. I guess that's out of the normal sports related things. So I do have a few here and there, but I really haven't ventured out.
Because I do know a lot of the soccer collectors like to speculate on like buying American football players and stuff like that, with the hopes that as kind of soccer grows in America with the World Cup and obviously Messi recently heading out there, that they'll be looking back at the American legends and kind of speculating on that. So, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that? If that does become a popular sport, what would you naturally first gravitate towards?
Yeah, the iconic names. You want Messi, you want Ronaldo, you want just if you're a moments person, there are certain moments you need to get for them. And then there's also Maradona. I know is a
Mhm.
big thing. So you always want to go for legends. You're always safe with legends, I think.
Yeah. So, were you aware of the top 100 tickets?
Oh yeah, I
The
followed it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think three tickets made it onto there that were soccer tickets.
Oh
One
really?
being, I believe, the hand of God. So that's a moment in
Yes.
football, which I'm
Uh huh.
sure you're aware of. Pele's
Yeah.
World Cup debut, and I believe it was Messi's friendly debut.
Right. Yeah. So
I'm
those
not.
those make sense. I mean, as far as like from an American perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, I really have to thank you for your time. I appreciate it. It's a lot of insight that a lot of people will take a lot of value from. So I really appreciate that. And hopefully, in some time, we'll have you back on here and show some new pickups.
Yeah. Hopefully. Hopefully.
Cool, cool, cool. Well, thank you so
Okay.
much again. Do
Appreciate
you
it.
want to
Thanks
give
for
your
having me on.
Instagram as well for everyone to follow? Because I'm sure
It. Yeah.
there's
It's
more value.
VVG Club. VVG. It stands for Vintage Video Game Club. So
Got you.
VVG Club. Follow me.
Appreciate that. Take care.
Okay. Be well. Thank you.
Bye bye, Eric.
Bye.